Time for one of my favorite features, the economic week ahead. Let's see what is going to be driving South Africa's economic week this week. And we've got our analyst, Dr. Bonke Dumisa, who joins us now. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Doc. I mean, South Africa is in a time of turmoil, but also some green shoots that we are seeing in various industries. Notably, I suppose one of the big issues, before we reflect on what's coming up, is what we're seeing in the manufacturing sector and the blackouts that have really put a lot of strain on it.
Yeah, it is very discouraging, and the problem with the Eskom load shedding is that every time it happens, it costs the South African economy millions and millions of rands. And Eskom seems not to understand that one, or even when they say they do understand it, we're not really sure about their plans to put this thing to an end. And as I will be discussing the manufacturing production figures, it will be very discouraging. And yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing this, even though it will not necessarily be the good news that your listeners and viewers like to hear.
Yeah, let's talk about that manufacturing production data that's coming out next week, Prof. We saw PMI out last week, badly impacted by the load shedding that you've just spoken about, but also the KZN floods having an impact on PMI there, business activity and sales. What are we expecting with manufacturing production data next week?
Let us look back briefly. We saw that in February, the manufacturing production figures showed a very small 0.2% increase, and that was very discouraging. But Eskom, the load shedding played a very big role in that, as you've already alluded to it, that this even affected the PMI, which is the purchasers index. What we expect next week is that the things will continue being negative. Why? Because the Eskom load shedding continued, and then but the issue of the floods in KwaZulu-Natal and some parts of the Eastern Cape will not feature in there, because the floods only happened now in April. But the load shedding issue is going to affect this significantly. And the problem with that is manufacturing is expected to increase jobs in South Africa. So if ever we have flat or even negative manufacturing environment, it means then that we are not going to see a very encouraging economic growth rate at the end of the year.
We've also got mining production data that is set to be coming out next week as well. I mean, no doubt the mining industry has had a good bout of production and sales because of the commodity super cycle. But I'm wondering what we're expecting to see now because of the various elements that may have an impact. And interestingly, I also think that the strike at Sibanye Gold may have some kind of impact in terms of the levels of production we saw in this period that's going to be reported on.
Okay, with the mining industry, when we need to go back to the last figures that we had in February, we saw that in February it reflected a very significant -6% contraction. So which means instead of the mining production increasing, we saw it going down. And I'm not really sure if ever the 2-month Sibanye strike was already on by the end of March. So if ever, it was already on. It will then affect these figures as well. And it is not really good for South Africa. But I must quickly add that this metals boom that we saw was influenced mostly by the sales of these metals. So it does not necessarily mean then that if ever the production went down in a particular month, it will definitely affect the sales that very same month, because there is a handover process where you produce this particular month and then it goes through the chain, it's sold there, and then there are global sentiments which actually influence that one, and we see the increases in sales. So it was mostly the increases in the prices of the metals rather than the quantity of the sales of those mining products. So we will wait and see if ever the very discouraging -6% figures in February are going to get better in March. But let's really be hopeful that things will get better.
Absolutely, we do remain hopeful indeed. Dr. Bonke Dumisa, who's an economic analyst, joining us this morning to talk about the economic week ahead, a focus there on manufacturing and mining production figures that are set to come up. But we're also getting a release of South Africa's net reserves, that data coming out early in the week, so you'll get a sense of where we are there as well.